Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. This is the Energy Networks Innovation Conference panel on the next steps in facilitating the energy transition. I'm Matt Hindle, Head of Gas at Energy Networks Association, and I'll be hosting the panel discussion this afternoon. You've heard a series of presentations in the session which has come just before this. Around how some of the network innovation projects are developing the evidence, developing options to support us in the transition to net zero. We're going to be broadening out from some of those perspectives to talk about what next steps we can take to facilitate the journey, how we can deliver on the sort of ambitions that have been set out recently in the government's 10-point plan, and how we're reacting to the strategies we're expecting to emerge in areas like heat decarbonisation and hydrogen over the coming months. Our focus for this afternoon is the role of gas in the energy system, and we'll be tackling some of the really big challenges around decarbonisation, what options there are for heavy vehicles, how we can decarbonise industry and what role the networks have in supporting industrial clusters, and crucially how we can decarbonise heat. That challenge which is going to bring decarbonisation to pretty much every household across the UK. You can ask questions to our panellists via the Q&A on the right-hand side of the screen. We'll get through as many of those as possible in the half hour that we have to tackle these rather meaty issues. I'm joined for the panel by Chris Clark, Energy Strategy Director at Wales and West Utilities. Hi, Chris.
Hi, good to meet you.
Tim Harwood, the Head of Programme Management and Director of the H21 project at Northern Gas Networks.
Thanks, Matt, and good afternoon, everyone.
Corinne Taylor, the Principal Consultant for DNVGL, who's been running the Decarbonised Gas Alliance for the last couple of years.
Afternoon, Matt.
And we should also be joined by Stuart Easterbrook, the Future Gas Strategy Manager for Cadent. So please do ask us questions as we go, but I'll take the chair's prerogative and direct the first question to Chris. So thinking across the decarbonisation challenge in the energy system, Chris, we hear a lot about the need for a whole systems approach to net zero. What does that mean in practice?
Yeah, I think it seems to be the buzzword now, whole systems, is it? I think we've been talking about it for a few years, but now everyone's talking about it. I don't think we've really ever agreed what it means, and I think it means something to everybody. I think what it means to me is really it's all about looking at the whole energy system, and that starts with generation or production of energy of some description, and it feeds right through the transmission and distribution systems, which would also include storage within that, and ends up with the end consumer, and including the appliances, and whether that be a vehicle or uses. And so the point of treating it in the widest possible way like that is so you can really understand the interaction between perhaps how we use our heating system and how energy is generated. I looked just a moment or two ago, and in terms of look at the energy scenario we have at this moment. It's dark, there's no solar, and there's very little wind today being generated. And so how does that then link through storage, transmission, through to what people are doing with their appliances now and will they work? And I think if you don't look at it, that whole system, all the vectors, heat, power and transport, then you'll get the wrong idea, and you'll get the wrong answers if you're trying to design what an energy system looks like in the future. So that's what it sort of means to me, Matt. I say many people have different ideas of that, but we take it from the broadest perspective.
And when you're kind of taking that broad perspective, it's easy to then sort of focus on the long term as well as the broad. It's easy to sort of naturally think about maybe what the 2050 system looks like and how consumers are going to be interacting with energy in the further future. So how do you sort of break that down into the next steps, and how should we think about the whole system in terms of the opportunities to make progress on decarbonisation in the short term as well?
Yeah, one of the projects we were involved in, and Ollie Lancaster was touching on it just now in the tools of engagement presentation, is the Pathfinder modeling and simulator that we've got. And that's a whole energy system simulator. So it includes mentioned heat, power and transport, all the different supply vectors, all the different demands, and all the way of sort of delivering it through from hydrogen to heat pumps to hybrid heating systems to hydrogen boilers. The whole gambit is in there. And what we're doing, the project with the other gas networks at the moment, is to come up with what that 2050 single simulation looks like, because everyone's got their own ideas and perhaps come up with lots of different scenarios. But what we need as an energy solution now is some single scenarios. So we're developing that single scenario for 2050, but more importantly, working out what all the steps are in between. And we're following the sort of 5-yearly intervals to match the carbon budgets. And in that way, we can all see what our milestones are along the way. And that will help us as energy networks and hopefully the whole energy system start to think about what it's got to do and when, and come up with almost our own plan rather than being told what the plan should be or no one telling us what a plan is. Let's actually start with a baseline. And obviously, it'll change over time. But let's start with something, get on with some stuff, and use that as a way of engaging that whole energy system.
And obviously an important time to be thinking about what the carbon budgets are going to mean in practice with the CCC advice due tomorrow. So I think we may well want to return to that as the discussion goes on.
Yeah, we're waiting with bated breath tomorrow morning and see what their thoughts are. I mean, they have signalled fairly clearly in the past what their direction of travel is. So look forward to digesting that in the morning.
And yeah, no doubt some fresh impetus to build on recent announcements as well. Tim, I think Chris started to touch upon the kind of role of consumers and the need to make sure that decarbonisation works for consumers, and particularly as I kind of signalled at the start around the debate on decarbonising heating. Clearly, the H21 project's been generating a lot of evidence around the options for consumers for hydrogen specifically. But building on that, what do you see as the ways in which we need to bring consumers with us on this journey, and how's technology going to support that?
I think one of the ways that we can do that is by mandating hydrogen-ready appliances. People are going to say, "Oh, well, he would say that, wouldn't he?" But if you take the difference between having to convert properties over and replace all the appliances against being slowly over time as people have consumer choice, they go into the shop, they buy a boiler or a new hob or a fire when they replace their kitchen. That could be hydrogen ready. It can still run on natural gas. And then when the time comes to convert it to hydrogen, we're able to look at that and think, yeah, that could be a 30 minutes to an hour job and just cost a few pounds rather than the many hundreds or thousands of pounds it would to convert everything over. And if we want to get to scale, and just to put it into some perspective, we're probably talking about 2,000 a day, potentially 20,000 a week, something like that, with the way that it's going at the moment to hit our 2050 target, which is 23 million consumers that have a gas supply in this country. I think if we don't do something along the lines of being able to get hydrogen-ready appliances installed and make the conversion a lot easier for people, it's going to cause disruption. One of the things that we found quite clearly when we did the H21 social sciences research is that the big restrictor to being able to accept hydrogen is the fact that they don't like a lot of disruption in their lives. The cost is another thing as well. So I think being able to bring the public with us is to get their confidence in the network so that they can deliver it safely, and confidence that they're not going to have too much disruption and too much impact in the wallet.
You've mentioned the social sciences research, which has provided some of that sort of insight into sort of consumer reactions. How are you taking that forward under the H21 project at the moment in the linking the physical testing, the hard innovation work, if I can put it that way, to the understanding of the consumer insights and what they want from a heating system?
I think they're both just as important as each other. You know, the safety side of things is really, really important. We do have to demonstrate our safety case for hydrogen, but we also have to get the public to accept that they want to put hydrogen into their homes and bring them along with us. So we've done the first stage of the social sciences research. The report's out, and we started on the second stage now, further work with Leeds Beckett University. This is a little bit more around how you message people and how you prepare them for conversion, you know, how you send out letters and social media, how you interact with them on the doorstep and have the conversations with them down in the village hall when you're coming to do your conversion. And it's proving really, really useful, and sort of some of it is quite eye-opening as well and not what we expected. So that's the great thing of having an independent body like Leeds Beckett University helping us. You know, it's all peer-reviewed good stuff, and yeah, we're about halfway through that at the moment, and we look forward to sort of finishing it off at the end of 2021 when the final report will come out. But yeah, it's very interesting, just as interesting as the safety side, actually.
And I should say, if any of the audience are interested in finding out more about any of these projects, each of the networks have a stand in the exhibition hall at ENIC. There's lots of information on the stands. There are people that you can chat to find out more. So please do that, and please do ask questions if you have them to the panelists using the Q&A on the right of the screen. Corin, Tim's talked a little bit about the sort of hydrogen boilers there, and kind of consumer perceptions around hydrogen in heat specifically. How would you sort of reflect on where we are in the heat decarbonisation debate more broadly, and how that's developing as one of the key challenges in this journey to net zero?
Yeah, I think it's excuse me. I think it's a really interesting where it's got to, and obviously we've seen some previews of what the Committee on Climate Change are thinking. We'll obviously see the full detail of their 6th carbon budget recommendations tomorrow, but they are talking about a lot of heat pumps, and they've previously expressed support for hybrid heating systems, which I think are potentially very suitable to houses in the UK that might not have the best insulation, and where you actually have a sort of boiler area that you can sort of slot in a smart system to. So I don't think there are any easy options here, and I think that a real challenge is going to be the consumer acceptance that Tim talks about. So, you know, if the Committee on Climate Change are interested in having 5 million heat pumps, as it seems to be in the previews, by 2030, then we need to find 5 million customers that are willing to buy them. We need to find, you know, the way to actually subsidise and roll that out, given that these are not cheap pieces of kit. So I think that we're going to have this kind of tension or kind of debate between what is the most pure energy efficiency scenario solution, and that will be heat pumps because they are more efficient than boilers, but also what's the most consumer friendly scenario as well. And I think on that side of things, hydrogen boilers are actually getting pretty good responses from consumers that we're seeing. And I think so that's sort of on the kind of energy efficiency and consumer side. And then I also think this issue around meeting peaks in demand is also extremely important. So, you know, it is only certain times of the year when everyone has their heating on at the same time. And at the moment, gas networks can deliver that energy to consumers and store that energy. And electricity networks haven't got the capacity to do that yet. So we'd need to think, if we were to move to electrified heat, we'd need to think about what we do to the electricity grid and what we do to interseasonal storage as well. I suspect that we'll probably end up with a mix of solutions. It's not going to be all one or the other. And I think one thing that I think would probably be helpful in the debate is if we saw more acknowledgement of that, rather than one side pushing their view solely. And I thought the ENA's Pathways report last year was quite interesting in that respect, because it had a role for hydrogen, a role for biomethane, and also some electrification and hybrid solutions alongside of that. And I think a kind of a mix in heat decarbonisation solutions is what is most likely to work.
But I think that brings us back to the point Chris made at the start around the importance of thinking around the whole system. And for anyone who missed the panel this morning, Guy Newey was emphasising the need to think of the consumer and the user as part of the system, and not just consider whole system from a kind of engineering perspective, but think about the user as an integral part of the system, which is clearly vital in that debate on heat. If we look now at the industrial end of decarbonisation, Stuart, there was significant ambition set out in the 10-point plan around the development of decarbonised industrial clusters, looking to develop 4 clusters by the end of the decade. These are major projects. How do we make sure they're delivered, and what do you see as the role of the networks, and particularly the gas networks, in that delivery?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think the 10-point plan is of course a really strong signal of government's intent. And as a regulated network, we also need the regulatory framework to support these sorts of changes. So we're quite pleased that the announcement today with the RIIO-2 plan includes that flexible framework and recognises projects like the industrial cluster we're involved with up in the northwest around HyNet, with funding to take that forward to do the detailed design and prepare the planning application so that we can move close to that stage of actually building the pipeline. I think the additional piece of work that it can be forgotten when you're engineers looking at building things and looking at safety cases. There's also an important piece of work to do, which will need, again, government and regulatory support around what's the rule book that glues all those bits together. So using HyNet as an example, you can build the pipeline. You know the industrial players that need the hydrogen to convert their processes. You've got your hydrogen production, you've got your storage, but how does it all work? From day one to day N, how do all those bits connect together and work together smoothly so that you get that efficient, secure, reliable energy system that is really taken for granted at the moment, because it all happens quietly behind the scenes, day by day, peak days, off-peak days, extreme days. But when you start building these new clusters, that security is really in the full glare. The spotlight is on it, and as soon as the framework needs to be developed there, so that we can start to build that framework and make sure that we have a regime that is going to deliver what the customers want, be it industry or potentially the other customers that might be involved with clusters like power generation, like transport hubs, and potentially even supplying sort of domestic trial areas off of a big cluster.
To that sort of governance point, how do you think the frameworks are best developed, or who do you see as primarily responsible for that? We're going to need to move quite quickly, given the timeframes.
I've been involved with sort of similar market developments in the past, not so much in gas, but what's worked really well is where you've got the networks, the energy sector, and BEIS and Ofgem all pulling in the same direction, all trying to solve the problems at the same pace. So I think that's what you need for not just for these clusters, but for pretty much all these major net zero projects that are critical to delivering our targets. You need everybody pulling at the same pace, all in solution mode. So we're having conversations with BEIS and Ofgem to see how we can take those first steps, and I think a BEIS Ofgem consultation supported by the industry to look at what the regulatory framework should look like from day one and onwards for the clusters would be a really helpful and positive first step.
And you mentioned the importance of sort of joining up all of the different parts of the picture. Corinne, I think outside of the networks world, clearly all of this relies, or what we've just been talking about, relies on hydrogen production and meeting the ambitions for both blue and green hydrogen to at least the sort of scale that was set out in the 10-point plan. What do you think that looks like from a producer perspective, and how do we develop the sort of business models that are actually going to develop that hydrogen market?
Yeah, I think there's still some uncertainty from a producer perspective. So it was obviously very welcome to see in the 10-point plan that the government would like to see 5 gigawatts of hydrogen production installed by 2030. That's only a starting point. We'll need a lot more than that to really see hydrogen rolled out, but it's a good start and in line with hydrogen strategies in other European countries as well. But as you say, what really underpins that, or what would underpin that, is a solid business model to finance that low carbon hydrogen production. So BEIS have been working at the moment. There's been an expert working group on hydrogen business models this year, and a report from Frontier Economics that narrowed down some of the options. And it seems to me that they're looking at 2 at the moment. So one of them would be some variant on the contract for difference framework, which currently supports offshore wind and other renewable generation. So you'd probably have a fixed payment for that production capacity, and then a variable payment that would top up the probably would account for the difference between the natural gas price and the cost of hydrogen production as well, and probably slightly different buckets for blue and green hydrogen that we'd see within that. So I think that's one option, and then the other one is probably some kind of regulated financing of hydrogen production as well. Now, I think the challenge is probably in the timing. So we're expecting another consultation on the detail next year, but final business models to be in place at some point in 2022, and the 10-point plan hasn't really changed that timescale. If you then factor in how long it takes to get planning permission and everything else, I think a lot of people would like to see those business models come a little bit earlier than that, particularly given the need to try and meet those ambitious targets for 2030.
And if I can come back to you, Chris, kind of related to that, you've seen through the last 10 years or so a lot of biomethane come onto different parts of the network, and particularly some parts of your network in the southwest. As we're starting to think about how the networks will support those hydrogen production markets, what kind of reflections would you have from that process on how we can structure connections and how we can facilitate blending to support that market development?
You're right. So biomethane has been probably one of the success stories, I think, of the gas industry. Again, very similar to hydrogen blending and things where we are now with, we weren't allowed to put biomethane onto the network, and there were lots of issues around it, of metering and gas quality, and all those were resolved very quickly in reality. And we went from, I think, one plant to, many dozens of plants across the UK within a couple of years. So I think there's some indications there of how we should be dealing with hydrogen and hydrogen blending. Obviously, the support mechanism for biomethane is through the renewable heat incentive that ends in a couple of years' time. So there's consultation now on what might replace that incentive system. But actually, the incentive system seems to be successful. Obviously, it's got to get it just pitched right. You don't want to be overpaying for it, but equally you want to inspire the market to get green gas onto the network. So yeah, there's certainly plenty to go at. I think also we need to, again, we talk about whole system, but I think also need to think about the whole regulatory system, which was really designed for the last century, and that's 20 years ago now. And I think it needs a lot of catching up. Clearly, the system inevitably we've got for economic regulation, which is more of an adversarial one, on the perspective of net zero, we can't do it like that. It needs to be much more focused on a cooperative and collaborative type of relationship between all the regulators, health and safety, economic, plus government, plus industry, plus the networks. We've all got to be in this together, and we've all got to contribute to that. So yeah, I think there's some really good lessons learned from biomethane. And you just mentioned Southwest. We've got some parts of the network which are getting to 100% biomethane in the summer. In the winter, obviously less when there's more demand, but certainly within the range of hybrid heating systems that could actually decarbonise those areas that perhaps be less suitable for hydrogen in the more rural parts. Certainly for ourselves, perhaps down in Cornwall, parts of Wiltshire, Gloucestershire, Somerset, all ripe for biomethane. So yeah, I think more to do on biomethane, but actually also some great lessons learned from the last 5 years, really.
Absolutely. And Tim, picking up on what Chris has just said around the kind of regulatory frameworks and the need to work together, I wondered if you'd like to build a bit on sort of what you said earlier around some of the H21 work on how we develop trials of hydrogen going forward, and particularly thinking about moving, as the 10-point plan set out, from a hydrogen neighbourhood up to a hydrogen town towards the end of the decade. What sort of partnership working do we need to see to deliver that?
I think it's vitally important that we work with the regulators to make sure we have the right funding in place and the right mechanisms, as Chris said, through Ofgem, but also the Health and Safety Executive on the safety side of things. We've recently asked the Health and Safety Executive Regulation Division if they'd like to come on board for the last 12 months of the H21 project. We could have waited until the end and then just given them literally probably like a wagon full of boxes of paper and everything else and said, look, there you go, plough your way through that. I think it's much more the smarter thing, to be honest, to get them on board at the start. They feel like they're part of the journey and they buy into it. There's ever such a lot resting on the fact that we can get a safety case for hydrogen approved. That will open the door for many other trials around the country. And we feel that having the regulators on board with us and keeping them aware of exactly what we're doing, and even in some cases, you know, them helping us in the decision-making processes is very, very important. And if we're gonna hit the targets, and the targets that we've got are very ambitious, we have to have everybody on board and everybody joining in. So yeah, the regulators are not just sort of standing on the sidelines anymore, sort of refereeing, if you like. They've got to be part of the play, and they've got to join in with everyone else. That's how you sort of get there a lot quicker.
And let's hope in that case that we're not referring anything to VAR, Tim. We've had a question in the Q&A about the mix system. If we see a mix of biomethane and hydrogen in the same network area, which I think probably was in response to your points, Chris. Ian's asked that in particular reference to WOBI and managing the WOBI index, but clearly there are some kind of wider implications there in terms of system management, in terms of billing. I wondered if you'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, certainly the plan and the vision for our own network is fairly distinct regions, some of which would be best suited for hydrogen, and those that are not suited for hydrogen, which is probably, in all honesty, the majority of our demand. But those areas perhaps less suited for it, or where hydrogen perhaps will be longer coming than in the earlier stages, would be the place to move from natural gas to methane, as we're doing now. So I think it sort of picks up a number of the points that things like the hydrogen ready boilers, they will run on biomethane or methane and a methane hydrogen blend. Then there's just obviously those tipping points once you get above 20% hydrogen, or of course in a hydrogen network with a blend of methane in it. So we shouldn't neglect that, because we don't want to waste biomethane. It's a really valuable product. Of course, it's produced in quite dispersed, fairly rural locations, so it's not ideally placed to transport it somewhere else for some other use, as some have suggested. Perhaps you transport it and put it into ships or something, but actually getting it to shipping and to ports, etc., major ports, is a massive challenge in its own right. So I think it's really about using it in the right way. Clearly not going to be mixing things up, but as you saw, I don't know if anyone caught the EVA with the what they're doing in Germany, where they're sort of predicting what the WOBI and the gas mix is going to be in a much smarter way at any one time, what the mix would be, all compliant safety perspective. But if it was a different CV at a different time, it appeared to me from that presentation that they got some really smart ways of thinking about how to deal with those changes in particularly calorific value and billing.
And I'm glad you've touched on shipping there, because I think transport's one of the big issues we haven't covered yet. Stuart, thinking about heavy transport in particular, Where do you see the kind of key challenges and opportunities there on biomethane and hydrogen, and what can we do as networks and through network innovation to support those markets?
Yeah, I think that one of the big challenges with transport is it's about moving weight. It's about moving loads around, and energy density is even more key. You can't you want to keep the overall weight of the vehicle down from its refueling system and its engine, so you can carry more. And that's why sort of the larger vehicles, the energy density of a gas can make it a clear winner in terms of the overall package that delivers what the people operating those vehicles need. So I think in the short term, using certified biomethane, there's an increasing pipeline of filling stations being built across the country to allow fleets to convert and tap into that supply. And then further on, we can see that hydrogen starting to take over that role. And as networks, we can support that. We can use our network as it gets converted to hydrogen. We can highlight where there are good candidate locations, where there may even be existing assets which can make a connection even easier. So there's lots we can do as networks to support and facilitate that group of customers, sort of refueling customers that are going to play a key role in decarbonising the UK.
And particularly linked, of course, to the industrial clusters and the way those might develop, as you were describing earlier.
Yeah, and the clusters or HyNet, when it was initially developed, it was focusing around providing an option for industry to convert to a net zero fuel. But when we presented it to regional stakeholders like the Metro Mayors up in Liverpool and Manchester, they said, "Oh, it's brilliant, industry. When can we get hydrogen for transport?" Because they see the challenges and there's no easy solutions for this. And if there is a secure, reliable, efficient supply of hydrogen, then it gives them other options to decarbonise their own mobility requirements in their areas.
We are very nearly out of time, having absolutely raced through that. I'll give all of you sort of a one-sentence final answer. So we're expecting an energy white paper, a heat and building strategy, a hydrogen strategy, a transport strategy, and an industrial decarbonisation strategy in the next 6 months or so. You can pick one policy for one of those strategies. What would you like to see, Corin?
I'd like to see a CFD for hydrogen production at a fair level, but particularly allowing enough hydrogen production. I mean, we need to have gigawatts of this, and the CFD would need to cover it.
Chris?
It would be hydrogen-ready hybrid first strategy for me, where we move to hybrid heating systems, decarbonise quicker, but also keep all our options open for hydrogen and biomethane. I don't want to leave any customers out there without the offer of a gas supply, and keeping them warm at least cost and least disruption.
Tim?
Government to mandate hydrogen-ready appliances, especially boilers. Stop all the noise in the press about and scaremongering about, oh, your boiler's going to have to be ripped out and you're going to be left sort of without any heating system in your home. I think we just need to put a positive spin on that and say actually hydrogen-ready appliances would actually deal with a problem and not cause a problem. And
Stuart?
I thought I was going to get around there. No one was going to take mine. No, I agree with Tim. So I would say mandating hydrogen-ready boilers ASAP, ideally 2023, if that's possible, and manufacturers are saying it. And it will mean appliances are going to people's homes with hydrogen on it, and it can really help that whole engagement piece.
Brilliant. So a bit of consensus there to end on, but I think really important message there actually, going back to Corin's answer, that you need the production support lined up with the appliances and how that's going to work for the users. So thank you very much to Chris, Corin, Tim, and Stuart for joining us on that panel, and to all of the presenters who came before as well. This also concludes the first day of ENIC 2020. So thank you very much for joining us. We hope to be back tomorrow. Explore the exhibition. Look at the various projects that are being presented on all of the network stands. The conference agenda will kick off again at 10:15 in the morning. And just to mark your card on some of the topics we've been discussing today, at 1 o'clock tomorrow, we've got an in-depth look at the plans for Gas Goes Green in 2021. That's the collaborative work between the gas networks to deliver the path to net zero for decarbonised gases. And at 4:15, right at the end of the day tomorrow, I'll be back with a panel on how we bring vulnerable customers on the net zero journey. Obviously a vital topic as we look towards the future of the energy system. And there are presentations before that on how innovation projects are supporting vulnerable customers. So I hope a lot of you will be able to join us for that. Look forward to seeing you there, and please enjoy the rest of ENIC. Thank you.